What do you think are some of the challenges that come with doing revenue management, pricing strategy, data analysis on your own when you have a vacation rental operation of your size?
It's a full-time job. There's not really anyone local that I can hire to do that. I did give you some properties that had challenging elements, and they're doing better than they ever have. I see our revenue increasing on a property that was previously challenging. The ability to know that they're getting all the attention that they need from you all, that's priceless. The thing that allows me to trust Angel Host is I don't think you claim to know everything. I think you work very hard to know what you need to know at all times and constant improving. This is a real good setup for us to have you all on board, and I don't have to oversee it. And for that fact alone, I don't know that I will ever leave it.
So we're going to get started in 5, 4, 3,
Just
2.
don't.
Hey, Joni, how are you today?
I am good. How about you, Sebastian?
Good to see you again.
Too.
Doing great. It was good to spend some time together in VRMA.
Definitely.
Yeah. Did you have a good time?
I did.
Yeah, yes. That's awesome. That's awesome. So listen, today I'm super excited and grateful for your time, of course. I want to get to learn a little bit more about your experience working with Angel Host and how that's been all about. Before we get into that, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your company?
So I started my company in the North Georgia mountains. We are in the Chattahoochee National Forest. I started 8 years ago. We manage 64 properties, and they vary from tree houses to glamping sites and full cabins.
Amazing. And so we'll talk a little bit about the idea of delegating revenue management. And before we get into the specifics, I want to understand, what do you think are some of the challenges that come with doing revenue management, pricing strategy, data analysis on your own when you have a vacation rental operation of your size?
I think the hardest part is it's a full-time job. And there's not really anyone local that I can hire to do that has those skills. And so if I'm going to someone that is outside of my area, then they have to build the skill set. So even after I've hired them, they have to become familiar with the area, and there's oversight. So it's not just a question of hiring somebody, but then there's regular meetings to discuss what's happening and maybe fine-tuning it that requires work from me. And so that's one of the challenges of just hiring someone outright, which might still come to pass as we grow. But right now, this is a real good setup for us to have you all on board, and I don't have to oversee it. And for that fact alone, I don't know that I will ever leave it. Because while you all check in, you're not looking to me for a lot of direction. You're looking for feedback, which is quite different.
And of course, when it comes to delegating a function that's so important and crucial as revenue management and dealing with pricing strategy and whatnot, there's a lot of concerns, right? There's a lot of things that you and I have been talking about a lot in the past, as far as considerations, right? Some of them being the fear of letting go of control, the fear of perhaps, what if this person doesn't know my market well enough? So can you tell me a little bit about what you went through when exploring the possibility of working with Angel Host?
Yes. So for me, my relationships with my owners, my employees, my guests, those are all crucial. They are superior to many other elements that make me or guide me in making decisions. So for me, to let go of this, whether I hired somebody to work for me or hired you all to take it, I needed to feel like I could then relay what was going on to the owner, and the knowledge that I would be holding whoever is in that position accountable for the decisions that are made, just like I would myself. So in letting go of it, I then passed the torch of responsibility and said, you do what's best, just like I would do what's best, but then don't ever leave me in a scenario where I can't explain why we did what we did. And that has worked well.
Yeah, because for you wanted to make sure that you had that understanding and that knowledge that this is what's happening and this is why it's happening, and not just, be left sort of in the dark about the strategy that's being put in place. How have you felt that that's been going, as far as you getting that, support or feedback loop or collaboration where it's, yes, you're seeing good results. Yes, you're seeing, from what we had been discussing, improved performance as far as sales goes and revenue goes. But the actual sort of concern that you had of not having any idea why, or not being able to speak with someone if you had questions, how have you felt that has gone with Angel Host?
So I've always had somebody answer my questions when I needed help. That's been a non-issue. For me, I don't like to throttle people, and that's hard when you're an employee. I struggle with that more with my employees and not throttling them and actually letting go. Somehow in my mind, if I have hired an outside source, then I completely surrender to that. And that has worked well, because in doing that, I have also taken into consideration how my owners feel when I say you need to give me control, because I have more knowledge of the situation. And so since you all are working on it 24/7, there is the knowledge for me that you all have more information than I do. So while I might question, I try not to control. And so that has worked well, because I have given you all free reign, and the owners that are aware of your presence, and not all of them are, but they have seen the progress. And so that speaks louder than anything that I could come up with. When I see our revenue increasing on a property that was previously challenging, and then I get reports from the owner that they see that also, and it's working, because I've got the communication I need. It's not a burden to me. It's getting done, and we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it's letting the results speak for themselves as far as that goes. And it's also, to your point, just having an open conversation with those homeowners around the importance of essentially trust, right? Trusting their recommendation. And that's crucial, because we've discussed this before. We say this all the time. We know we can increase sales. We know we can outperform the market. It's a matter of whether we can have the pricing flexibility to get there. And it's not always easy.
No.
So how have you managed to achieve, of course, not with all of your owners, but with the owners that you have managed to achieve pricing flexibility? How have you managed to do so, and how has Angel Host helped you in that process?
So I tell my owners there's hills I die on, and there aren't many of them. That can be a very practical thing, like we will use our linens. You will equip your kitchen with these items, and that extends into revenue management. And I think the reason it works is because I give a lot, so when I take, it's very clear that they need to give me that. Regular information that comes to them in the way of a newsletter or answering questions with data earns their trust. But in the end, even if they don't trust me, they know there's certain hills that to partner, they have to give me control of them. And sometimes people do that a lot more readily in one area, like let's say the linens, and not so easily in revenue. But when you give in the other areas, it allows them to trust you in an area that's very difficult for them. And so that's generally how I do it. I go out of my way to accommodate in areas that are important to them that I don't find relevant, so that when I have one that is relevant, they'll give it to me. And sometimes that takes years. That takes time, and sometimes it's not an initial 100%. And you had that same experience with me. You did not get 100% right out the door, because I wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing. But that's generally how I managed to take difficult situations with owners and gain that control.
Yeah. And it's also, you were saying this the other day when we were having dinner, that it's finding the right analogy. It's finding the right way to communicate the importance of pricing flexibility. And it comes down to just removing the focus from what is the price point at which I'm selling, and is it low or lower than I would wish to see, or that I was seeing in previous years, and focusing on what did we gross, like how much did we achieve in the month, in the quarter, in the year, right? And what was the analogy that you had mentioned that you had found worked with one owner?
One owner finally clicked when I explained that it was much like if you had ever been in school and got a 0 on a test. If you're looking for your RevPAR to be as high as possible, then you can't have a bunch of zeros for every day you didn't book because you didn't emotionally feel attached to the number that was being put on that day. And sometimes in those scenarios, the analogy works even better when you can show them how much they would not have had to drop it that much in order to avoid a zero. And that analogy is something we've all learned the hard way, I would assume, although some of the people might be brilliant enough not to, that, you all took a zero at some point and was devastated by what it did to your grade is something that resonated. But again, sometimes less is more. Having the notion that you are educated in the field, that if you can't do something, you've hired somebody who can, and the ability to show them a few numbers earns their trust. In other instances, there's a lot of numbers you need to show them to earn their trust. But again, if you've hired somebody like Angel Host so that you can then say, I'm giving you full reign, which is what you would really like in order to perform. The flip side of that is when somebody comes complaining and needing info, I'm handing it over. And you'll need to be the one to prove why you did what you did.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. In terms of before Angel Host, going back to the fact that you were dealing with, pricing on your own, what are the challenges of letting the tool do its own thing, right? Whatever tool it is, whether that's Price Labs Beyond, Wheelhouse, Turbo Suite, there's so many dynamic pricing tools out there. There seems to be new ones coming up every week or so. Like, what have you found happens when you just plug in whichever of those tools it is and you just cross your fingers, close your eyes, and hope for the best?
I think you asked an interesting question because I actually used two pricing before I ended up where I was when you all took over some of our properties. And so that really goes back to, it doesn't matter how great a tool is, if it doesn't resonate with you, if it doesn't work the way your mind works, then you struggle, and then therefore you're spending more time on it. But for me, it goes back to the analogy we just had with the car. The car that you all used to get here that had no driver still had somebody watching the car, because we didn't know what might be thrown at it. We don't trust the car. It's a machine. Yeah. Same thing with the Price Labs. I mean, I can put, when I discuss pricing with my owners to any basic level, like early on when we're signing a contract, and you get that wonderful question, what will the daily rate be? And that's a very deep question. So I say there are three numbers, and I consider them different temperatures in a bathtub. Your base number is a nice warm bath, your max is hot, and your minimum is cold. And when you're looking at those numbers and you're making those juggles, if you have dropped a property online 2 days before Christmas in our area, then the computer could put them at $700 or $800 a night when their maximum work $350. And you don't want people to be gouged like that. So that's an obvious example of the control, and it goes all the way down to small things that you need to be controlling.
Yeah, for sure. And how much time were you taking to basically do manual overrides or look at pacing reports or just look at overall indexes that have to do with revenue management prior to working with Angel Host? Was this something that you were spending enough time on and finding the time to really dive deep into, or?
I was not spending enough time on it, but with as many cabins as I have, it's close to a full-time job.
Right. And how did you know that it wasn't enough time?
Probably just the awareness that whatever I'm doing in any capacity, I'm looking for somebody who knows what they're doing, so that I can mimic or learn, at the very least mimic. Ultimately, I'd like to learn. And so I think anytime you have a business that's growing, you're constantly looking for, where's that weakness? Where have I grown that I need to bring in more help?
Yeah. So. And not everyone is comfortable with that idea of delegation. And again, it comes down to either trust or just being someone that really wants control. How were you able to, quote unquote, let go of that in terms of, okay, I'm going to give this a try? And what would you say to someone that's facing a similar dilemma of like, sounds good in theory, on paper, the numbers that you're sharing look good, but like, oh man, it's like I'm having a hard time with the idea of letting go?
I think for me, it's self-awareness. I tend to hold on to things almost to the point of too late. I'm probably now older now where I learned just before then to let go. But I mean, you know when you have a project you've been putting off, you need to read more, you need to study more. And the fact is, if you're growing at some point it's wise to say, I might bring this back in later, but right now I've put off doing something about it long enough that we've got to do something. We need to do something. It's not fair to our owners. It's not fair to me and everything I've put into it to build this business this long. Mm-hmm. It's time to start looking and saying, where can I bring in some help? And then, you can always change. As I said, I used 2 other pricing systems before I ended up where I am.
For sure. And it's not like we're handcuffing you on year-long relationships or anything like that. I mean, you're free to stay with us as long as you're happy with the results and with the service. And talking about this service, what are your thoughts on, yes, we offer data, we offer technology, but a big part of what we bring to the table has to do with the human element as well of the service. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to working with Angel Host? What has your experience been working with your account manager, working with your revenue manager? How has that been? So
for me, the thing that allows me to trust Angel Host is I see evidence of what I'm hoping my owners see in me. And that is, I don't think you claim to know everything. I think you work very hard to know what you need to know at all times and constant improving. My account manager is awesome. The idea of her moving, I need to know if she decides she wants to do something else, because I'm going to change her mind, because I like the communication style. And that goes back to the software and what works for you. It's also important that in any software, that anybody we bring in as property managers, that understanding what's happening and that person communicates and teaches in such a way that you understand is crucial. Mm-hmm. And I've always had that at Angel Host. Yeah, you were saying about your revenue manager that you liked the way that she was sort of concise and to the point. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why that is the case, that you've enjoyed that approach in terms of communication? Because I didn't pay somebody else to then work on trying to understand. If I'm going to hand it off, then I want to be able to know what's going on concisely, get the answers, and then move back to the rest of the jobs that I haven't been able to find an Angel Host to do. Of course, delegating certain things should in principle liberate some time to focus on other things, right? And it's this idea of like, what's the best use of your time? What have you found when it comes to that self-awareness that you were referring to, that is the actual best use of your time as a CEO and as a founder, now that you've managed to let go of the revenue piece? Oh, there's always a hot potato. There's always something else to come into play. Sure. Constantly, and that's, I think, in a limited perspective, the name of the game is, where's my attention needed now? Where have we grown that we need to, quote unquote, find another Angel Host or solution, or change, or whatever's required there. So between selling ourselves to the owner and then selling ourselves to the guest and then delivering, there's always something to fill that. What is something that you look back at, let's say, when you had to be doing this for all of your properties as far as pricing goes, that you're like, I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore? Oh, well, if any of the owners call and they want to know why we're doing what we're doing, the knowledge that I don't have to spend 30 minutes analyzing the decisions I made on that property and why, and remembering them and the other elements that were at play. I know I can pick up the phone, call Angel Host and say, I need to cash in on that promise, that I need this owner to understand why we did what we did. And the ability to know that you'll do it. And it's not a question of Angel Host doing it. It's a fact that whoever made those decisions is going to have an answer and they're going to deliver. One of the things I remember from our previous conversations had to do with the fact that you had a team, right? You wanted to build that team, continue to develop that team. And you had this concern that perhaps we would come in as a bit of a replacement to that team. Whereas in reality, I feel like it's been more of a collaboration with that team than a replacement of that team. What are your thoughts on how that's been playing out? Excellent. I get an email, stating move this image, change these words in the description. It's copied to the people that can do it. So I'm aware. In the end, it's really quite fluid. We don't always like knowing we need to do it, but it's a part of the game that we play when we're trying to get the most out of a property. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we were having a conversation this morning with another one of our clients in this same studio, and talking about the fact that each host, each operator is somewhat different, and
because of that nature of the fact that each operator is somewhat different, we as providers and partners, like we like to see ourselves, have to adapt to some degree to those needs. So to your point, we have you for as an example wanting to be super aware, super in touch of what's going on, and even to the level of like your team making some of the changes on the listing optimization side of things and letting us change everything pricing related. We have other clients like the one we were speaking with this morning, John Hildebrand, where he's like, just do it all, right? So it just goes back to this idea of understanding that as a partner, this is not just, let me throw you this piece of technology and wish you good luck and hope it goes well, but it's also understanding, okay, what do you need? What are you trying to get out of this? What would it take for you to see this as a success 6 months, 12 months down the line? And trying to find something that adapts to that need, right? And I think we spent a lot of time trying to find that something until we did.
Right. And I think that just goes back to what I said, is that when you, whether it's me with an owner or you guiding me towards this revenue management and listing optimization, it is a knowledge of learning what's important to the person and giving on that so that you can then get out of them what you need and vice versa. So yes.
How have the results been for you? How have you, like revenue performance wise, what have you seen since Angel Host took over revenue management?
Some of the properties, I didn't give you any that had challenging owners, but I did give you some properties that had some challenging elements, and they're doing better than they ever have. Other properties I wouldn't say are doing better, but they are doing well without my supervision. And they are owned by people who are very much focused on the bottom line. And so it's the ability to know that I don't have to give them any attention, that they're getting all the attention that they need from you all. That's priceless.
Yeah, well, happy to hear that some are doing better than ever. And of course, if there's properties that are doing equal to previous years, we always like to look at, okay, what's been the market sort of growth or decline? And if there's a market that has declined by 20% and we are doing the same as last year, well, all of a sudden, that's good, right? Of course, we always try to increase sales year over year, and we like to compare it against the market as well in real time, because at the end of the day, that gives you a more accurate picture, because year over year, again, it's not always an accurate comparison, which is something that I'm sure you get from owners as well, right? Those owners telling you what's happening year over year. And, you know, they maybe bought at a peak in terms of, you know, what was being talked about as far as revenue expectations, and they bought maybe very expensive properties, and, you know, now they have to service that debt. And so how are you navigating those homeowner conversations, and perhaps even leveraging some of our data to have those owner conversations as far as, you know, owner education goes?
So none of the properties that you have did we have a year ago. So in relevance to Angel Host, there's not a lot that can be said there. I can tell you that the owners that I've had for years, they see the difference. Again, they trust me. And that does relate to Angel Host because I trust you. And so they know and I've equated to stock. If you buy stock, you have high moments, you have low moments. You're still quite profitable with the ownership of the home. You're just bringing in less per month. And so, but the stock analogy sits well with them, and they know we're in a low period, and we're constantly, whether it's through the newsletter or communicating in group chats and Slack, talking about the things that we're doing, what amenities are being sought after, what we're doing to lengthen the minimum stay. And many of those things are things we have learned through having you on those properties with Angel Host, and being able to have those properties observe what you all are doing with them. So in that sense, year to date, don't have a relevant thought, but I can see that in a year it will be something we will be talking about. Yeah,
no, definitely. And that pricing flexibility decision of letting us work with the properties that do have that pricing flexibility makes a lot of sense in the sense that at the end of the day, like we were saying, that's what we need really. I mean, we need availability as well. We need availability in the calendar and pricing flexibility to perform. And it's understanding that sometimes you as a property manager might want to provide that pricing flexibility, but not necessarily the owner. And we talk about analogies and ways to get this message across, we talk about the concept of fixed costs versus variable costs, and how when you're looking at a property that's empty, you have the choice to either let it empty, right? Keep the price where it is and the probability of it getting booked is low, or you have the option of saying, you know what, let's perhaps lower it to a certain point, right? And that certain point, when you think about it from a numbers perspective, is what does it cost for me to get that incremental booking, right? What's the cost of you getting that extra guest? What's the variable cost? Because the fixed cost is going to have to be paid for regardless of whether you get that booking or not.
Correct.
The variable cost is what it costs you to get that extra guest, right? And so as long as that extra cost of getting that extra guest is covered, then really whatever extra dollar you can get on top of that helps you cover for fixed costs that you would have had to pay either way, right?
As someone who deals with the owner, I think the element that's missing in that analogy that ends up working in our favor over time is this notion if you ask an owner what their two highest concerns are, it's their home being protected and making whatever it is that they want to make, whether that's a money amount, a total amount, or number of days booked, whatever that looks like. And so I find that when you have proven that you're going to take care of the home, then being able to jump to your analogy works a lot better, because that's their first concern, is that, they'll say, I don't want it clearanced. Well, we're not clearance. There's a difference between clearance and competitive. And right now the competitive price is considerably lower than its premium price, but that doesn't make it a clearance. And so I think that they go hand in hand, learning the owner learning that they can trust you and how you're going to maintain the home and hold guests accountable, and the fact that you're not ever wanting to put a clearance price on a property allows them to hear what you're saying and be able to trust it.
And in terms of the saturation that we hear a lot about in terms of more and more competition coming into the market, why do you think that having a solution like Angel Host gives you an edge to be better equipped at competing in that landscape of oversaturation and more supply coming in? Because at the end of the day, everyone else is just using dynamic pricing. So using dynamic pricing in and of itself is no longer, an advantage.
Right. No, absolutely, because it goes back to it being a full-time. At a certain point, don't know what that magic number of properties is. Yeah. I know for me, it has become a full-time job. Yeah. So if you can't dedicate full-time to your website and to your listings and your guest communications, they're going to be inferior. And the same thing applies when you're pricing and you're arranging a listing and watching the data come back from the changes you make and then dancing in another direction. Yes, it has to. Yeah. And it's
understanding that there's a point in the growth of a property management company where you're too large to be doing everything yourself as a founder, but too small to afford that full-time dedicated person in each of these areas that you would need to excel at each of these areas. And I think that's the transition point, or the phase where we tend to come in and add a lot of value as well. Because the reality is that, why did you not hire a full-time revenue manager?
Because to hire a full-time revenue manager, I would have to become more educated in this myself to know that I was leading somebody, or that they were doing what I needed them to do, or how I would want it done. Are you going to say to someone who has no real proven track record, here you go, you have free reign, just back me up if it's something? You can't do that. You don't know. You haven't equipped them. They don't know. They might know a lot of data and they might know a lot of pricing, but even when you all step into my market, you spend time learning that market. Yeah. And so that's for me, the biggest element is I've handed it over and I feel like I will get what I need. And if I don't, then I know I'll get answers. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also recognizing that,
we've run the numbers on when does it start to make sense for, financially speaking, this to be in-house, right? And it of course depends on the market and the gross bookings per property that you have as a portfolio and whatnot. But we're talking in the hundreds, right? When it becomes a no-brainer to say, you know what, let's bring this completely in-house. And it's understanding that even when you're there, you're still looking at, to your point, having to train that person,
right,
having to make sure that the person you bring on is the right person, which for the first 6 months of bringing someone in, you're paying them to train them. That's the reality. You're paying them to train them, and there's this saying of hiring is guessing, firing is knowing, and it's very true when you're bringing functions like this in-house.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I think, it makes sense from the perspective of wanting to be ready if eventually this becomes something that you want to bring in-house, and understanding that if that is the case, we're still around. I mean, there's still clients of ours that have a revenue manager and still see value in bringing us in, if anything, just to increase the capacity of their existing revenue manager.
And I would say too that just having the exposure to you over these years is going to help if and when I had to decide to hire somebody, because it's refined and educated me on what I'm looking for.
Yeah, because hiring a revenue manager is a tricky role. I mean, what do you look for?
Exactly.
What do you look for one?
Right.
and what's the CV?
Right.
What should that CV look like? It's there's 3 elements to a good revenue manager, and we think that those are, one, you have to have the numbers orientation. You have to be very good with numbers, very analytical. We look at engineering backgrounds, we look at data analytics backgrounds for our hiring in terms of revenue management. And that's crucial, right? But then you need to also have this intuition, right? Which a lot of times, if you're extremely good with numbers, you might not necessarily also have this emotional sort of understanding of, okay, what are the macro trends at play here, and how is the guest expectations affecting the way that I should be setting my pricing and the reviews, and overall just intuition around what the guest wants and how that affects the pricing strategy, but also the industry as a whole. And then of course, which is where we see this as a true partnership, is the local market knowledge and understanding, because as much as we'll have the data, you are the expert locally, right? And I think one thing that a lot of people perhaps struggle with when they're considering a solution like Angel Host is, well, I'm the expert, so how are you, a Canadian company, gonna come and tell me how to do pricing in Georgia, right? So what have been your thoughts on our ability to, again, we're circling back on this topic of it's a partnership, on our ability to, assist you with the data, the industry knowledge, the intuition, as well as, the very analytical component of it, as well as understanding the data enough to be knowledgeable of your market, but also hear your feedback and also hear your input, and also make sure that it's a two-way stream.
I have felt the need to offer very little input, to be honest. Now, to be fair, you all been dealing with our cabins for a couple of years now. So there's knowledge of the area there. And so maybe if I went back far enough, I could remember doing that. I think the thing I would encourage, and I have to encourage myself on a regular basis, is it doesn't matter how good I am at something. I can deal with a guest that's flaming mad and irrational and foaming at the mouth better than anybody in my business. But if I'm not there to handle it, I'm still not there to handle it. And so if I haven't equipped somebody to do the pricing, and we are getting closer and closer to listing optimization being something I feel we might be as strong with as you all are, simply because I have somebody that's looking at that, and Alex is understanding it, and she's smart, she's seeing the trends, and she studies enough about listings and what makes them tick. But if you don't have somebody there to put out the foaming mouth guest, then it doesn't matter how good you are. And so that's really what it comes down to, is the realization there's not enough of you or somebody else. And so you've got to find somebody that you can either train or who knows how to do it.
Yeah, again, and I'm sure that a big part of you developing that listing optimization expertise, in a way, partially at least, has come from us being able to collaborate on, hey, this is what you should change. This is what we're seeing, and the reason why it should be moved up and down, adjusted left and right, whatever that might be. And if eventually you want to start doing that yourself, so be it. I mean, we're happy to adapt. I think it comes down to that. And I think that's where we're at with you in terms of, okay, let us focus on the revenue management piece, the dynamic pricing piece, the market data piece, and then assist you to make sure that you have the listing optimization side on your end. And it is working pretty well, I feel.
Yes, it is. I mean, I look forward. I've never broached the discussion, but, I look forward to the next evolution of what that will look like, whether it's handing 10 properties over and you giving feedback to one person who then goes and changes 10, the development and the growth, and everybody learns in different ways. And sometimes just observing is just as powerful as education and reading and any other way of learning how you might do things, including just accidentally bumping into the right thing. And so I think that's been invaluable. Yeah.
And I think one thing you mentioned just before is it's not because you cannot do this.
No.
You could
definitely
become the revenue management expert if only you had the hours.
We'd go out of business. I mean, I could invest my time to this degree. There are things I do well in the business that I do slowly, and there are things I do well in the business that I am very quick at. This would be a slow one. So how much is it going to cost me while I self-educate, or even if I'm completely educated while I execute? So again, it's not about what you can do. It's about what you should be doing and how many hours you have in a day.
Yeah. And it's opportunity cost.
Yes.
Like,
definitely.
what's the alternative?
Right. And if I had ever felt like, and I think this is the most important thing for me, if I had ever felt like there was any wavering from, I intend to hand you the owner and I need you to explain to them why we did what we did, then it would not be cost effective. It would not bring me peace of mind, because at the end of the day, if I'm handing that to you, then I need you to be able to logically deal with the owner. And since I know that's done, then it is completely off my back.
Absolutely. And what has that allowed you to, again, we were talking about like all the different things. There's always a hot potato, but strategically think of more now that revenue is sort of taken care of?
Well, I mean, there are other things that, for instance, our website and our software development, that requires constant growth. And while those two languages are completely foreign to me, it takes time. You implement things, whether it's on your website or in our software, and then you have to wait and decide that didn't work and shift another way, and it allows me to focus on that. There's always a hot fire. Right now it's cleaning. Next month, who knows what it'll be. This is important. And, there's other important things. And probably if I were going to think a little longer on this, what I said would have been owner acquisition. When I look at our owner acquisition now, I know what we're going to do. I know how we're going to close the sale. I know what list I'm handing the different departments to complete. And the revenue is one of those. And the fact is that while Angel Host is helping me to make money, new owner acquisition is allowing me to make even more money. And so that ability to not worry about that element and hand it off is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in terms of like final thoughts on, let's say someone is listening to this and is hesitating. Like, we've been talking already maybe for a little while. Sounds too good to be true. Sounds good on paper. They maybe like us, which is why they're still talking to us, but they're still just almost there in terms of like taking that leap of faith. What would you tell them?
Yeah, you can't wait till the ship hits the reef. You really need to turn it before then. So for me, it was that, what I'm gonna hand it over. Not real keen on handing anything over. So you're taking it and I'm giving it what's the comfort. What do you need for that comfort? For me, it was accountability. That I understand as someone who manages owners that to be restrained is to make things difficult, slow you down, not reach your highest goals. And so for me, it was saying, great, what can I do if I'm going to let go of this? I need to totally let go of it. As dramatic as that sounds. And what do I need in return? And so for me, I would say that's what they need to look for is what is that thing that's going to say, okay, I've got this to fall back. And I'm all about trying. So it doesn't work. Great. We're going another direction.
Sure.
Doesn't matter what the situation is.
Yeah. Letting the results be the thing that keeps you in the relationship rather than some sort of commitment long-term, which who knows where we're going to be a year or 2 years from now.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't learn anything else that's in property management, it is that what works today may not work tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And what are you going to quickly find to shift and move the rudder in a different direction?
Yeah. And our responsibility is to make sure that we're continuously evolving.
Yes.
And proving our value with results, with innovation, with improvements, with communication, with reporting. And I think you've seen it also in the evolution of our partnership. We're not just saying this is what we do and that's it, that's all. There's always, continuous
I would say anybody that's listening in would sound like it's been a smooth ship for us. And I don't feel like that I have ever felt that Angel Host did not deliver. I would not say that, but there have definitely been, there's been a lot of dancing to get where we are.
Yeah.
And I don't see that changing.
Yeah. And it's normal. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is what partnerships are all about. And if you have a position of having a vendor or a provider that gives you a piece of tech and says, good luck, setting it up. If you don't like it, sorry, but that's what we have to offer.
No, Angel Host does not do that.
It becomes a little bit more challenging to figure it out.
Right. If it's not custom, you can only get so much out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And at any given moment, that could change. And if they're not dancing with you, then it's not going to work. You're going to find another partner.
Yeah. Now we're enjoying the dance.
Yes, very much so.
And just to wrap it up at a high level, like industry-wise, what are you looking ahead? What are you excited about for the coming months for the industry or you as a company? Where's your head at when you look ahead?
I'm currently working on a very refined onboarding process for the owners, because we're getting big enough that I have to face that uncomfortable feeling once again that some of that has to be handed off. And so that's something that I'm working on right now. And I'm excited to find the time to do that. So the end of our busy season's in December and I can start diving into that more like I want to. Yeah.
And any thoughts or lessons that you'd like to share on anything you might have learned at VRMA? I know there's always, some sessions better than others. Yeah. But is there anything that you took out of the event as a whole?
I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that I spent so much time focusing on balancing responsibilities so that the others I brought could focus, that, the whole time I'm telling them not to work, I'm working so that they don't have to work. And I always spend a lot of time in the vendor hall looking for what we're seeing and what we're wanting to do. But I was really excited by the keynote speaker yesterday. It was nice to refocus on unique experiences for our guests, because they can rent a bland hotel or cabin anywhere, and that goes back to your pricing. If you're pricing and you're offering something that feels unique, then that goes along with supporting your pricing. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want to say that I really appreciate you taking the time. We didn't pay you to do this, so it really means a lot that you took time on a sunny, beautiful day, which is your last day, I believe. Yes, headed to the airport from here. Heading to the airport from here. I know that you didn't have to do this, and the fact that you did means a lot to me personally, means a lot to everyone at Angel Host. We really, really appreciate you as a person, as a client, as a partner, and as a friend. And we hopefully look forward to working together for many more years to come. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joni. Thank you. All right. Hand five. All right. Thank you.